Inside the Birds is back. What's up, everybody? It's Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan, and it's exciting to be in April because April means the NFL draft is right around the corner. Even though there's still several weeks here, 3 weeks to
Three
go,
weeks.
and
Yeah.
shoot, a lot can happen in 3 weeks, and there's a lot of intel to get in 3 weeks. It's still time for us at ITV to now sort of turn the page past free agents. There's not going to be some kind of big name free agent signing on the Eagles. There never was going to be, but there's certainly not going to be now. Although we do know that they guys like LeGarrette Blount or the acquisitions, whether trades can still happen. But we've done a lot of free agency. We're going to turn the page to the NFL draft. And part of this show, what we're going to try to do, and this is something that we haven't done before, and it was your idea, so I want to tell everybody that you had a really good idea here about this, is as we sit 3 weeks away, is sort of try to figure out the landscape with the Eagles picking a 10, what we know of right now, what it's going to possibly look like when we get to 10 when the Eagles pick, which obviously matters what happens 1 through 9. And we've got some information there that we think can help us make, at least from 3 weeks out, a pretty fun, educated guess on what we're looking at here. That's probably going to be fairly accurate too.
Right. So from our sources, we've talked to a bunch of the teams in the top 10. Their team needs are going to be different than the fans' team needs. Like, they don't look at it like fans do. The smartest teams always look to upgrade, no matter how good the fans might think they're at a position. Teams more often than not will think differently. They'll go, oh, you know what? Yeah, we're good there, but we can be better. If the player drops, we're going to take that guy at that position where it looks okay, but we could be better. So, it's interesting. So what happened was, the impetus for this idea was, I did a couple interviews. You did a couple interviews locally, and the big thing is, okay, what's going to happen to town? Are they going to? Everyone's talking about trading down, like they could just snap their fingers, like the Eagles could trade down, folks. This is not a very good first round on paper. Just, we've been warning you for like 2 months now. There are not a lot of elite players, so you have to ask yourself, unless someone drops down, i.e., when Devontae Smith dropped down far enough, the Eagles traded up. Sure, that could happen. That happened 2 years ago. But this is just not the kind of draft. Like, their good corners are going to go anywhere from like maybe 5 or 6 to 20. But they're, barring something unforeseen, I don't know that anyone would trade up for these guys.
Right.
And that's the thing. There's just not, like Jalen Carter situation. Teams are still gathering information. We're exactly 3 weeks from today is the first day of the draft, the first round.
Yeah.
Teams are still digging into that situation as we talk to people.
Yep.
He visited the Eagles recently, a couple weeks ago. He's on his tour there, visiting teams. I guess Drew Rosenhaus is supposedly, whatever. They're looking to just visit teams in the top 10 or so. We'll see if they stick that. We're going to explain visits and what they mean. We're going to break this thing down as we like to do at this time of year. We'll get to that in a couple minutes, but just to understand, like, this is not the draft where you're going to get rich real quick, because there's just not a lot of players you go, wow, this guy's great. Like, and then there's the Carter situation. Yeah, he's elite. He might be the best player for this draft, but he's got some real issues to deal with.
No doubt about it. He does. And I look forward to, as these weeks go by, and then of course when we get closer to the draft and we start to do our pre-draft show and everything, is really getting into the meat and potatoes of all these guys. And we seem to get the best injury intel and sort of character red flag intel much closer to the draft. So we'll have that too.
Oh, next week, I spoke to 2 teams earlier this week. Their medical meeting is next week. It's funny you mentioned that, because that's a great segue to those shows, is once we figure out, because there's going to be stuff like we just don't know.
Yeah. When's the recheck in Indianapolis?
It should be soon.
Yeah, I think so.
It should be soon, because I know there's a running back who's got to go back, who's got to be evaluated for medical. There are guys who had ACL reconstruction. Clubs have to get updated scans on where the knees are, how's the rehab's going. So no, it's something we'll be looking toward, not just the first round, but guys who teams like. The rechecks will ultimately determine whether this guy's a second round pick, third round pick, and so forth.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, it's in Indianapolis. I believe they call it the NFL Combine Medical Recheck or something like that, where all the people who are coming off surgeries, as Adam said, or any kind of physical ailments who needed more evaluation from a medical standpoint, they go back to Indianapolis for now. There's not like press conferences and media, and it happens. It's the only thing about the combine that nobody really cares about from a media standpoint, but from a team standpoint, really, really important.
It is. Now, not every injured player goes back. It's where,
Correct.
as you just mentioned, if clubs want it done, they're going to have it done there, and they'll go back to Indy, and they're just there for the day to get over testing that needs to get done. But the thing also is like on the physicals in Indy for the combine, sometimes when stuff is found out that teams weren't aware of, let's say the guy has a knee issue. If the kid had to have surgery then, like around right after the combine, then he'll definitely go back because they're going to want to see where the kid is going, how the rehab's going.
No doubt about it. All right. If you're really interested on defensive linemen, and you should be, because if you're an Eagles fan, that's an area they always pay attention to in the draft. Make sure you check out the latest, the Intel with Greg Cosell. It dropped Wednesday morning on the Inside the Birds podcast and YouTube platforms. If you, I'll just give you this little hint, because we went through at least a dozen defensive tackles, and if you listen to the edge rusher show, which, by the way, thanks to the fans, we love you out there. I think over 11,000 people just saw the video alone, not even the podcast. That was incredible. So obviously people love the edge rusher show, but you could tell listening to Greg that he didn't value the blue chip talent of this edge rusher class. It was deep as far as you got a variety of guys who can do different things and play in the NFL, but was not a blue chip endorsement from Greg on all the edge rushers. Defensive tackles, a little bit different. Defensive tackles, Greg likes them. And not just one guy, not just two guys. He even gave us a couple of names that we didn't even know about at that position that he really likes.
Well, it's not that we didn't know about. We didn't know that they were as good as Greg said.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
So right. And our eyes are like, oh, okay. Now, also, we had some questions about this, and this happened last year. They're probably 5 to 10 players, which we had not had time for by position, which we're going to crowbar into our final show with Greg.
Mm-hmm.
There's a D tackle. There might be there are a couple ends. There are a couple miscellaneous players, which we'll just add to our final show to make sure. Because Greg, like Riley Moss is a guy I talked to, because I said to Greg, I'm hearing great things. What do you know? He goes, oh, I haven't seen him. And then we texted each other on Wednesday, and he said, oh, hey, by the way, I saw him. I really like him. You're right. Because he wasn't aware of him. And I said, I'm telling you, no one's talking about this kid. This kid's going to go in the second round. He's like, okay. And then when he saw the tape, he's like, I really like him. Mm-hmm. What do you hear? And I said, mid-second through mid-third, probably second, because he's built well. Some teams see him as a potential of playing slot or safety, though most teams see him as a corner. But so those are the kind of guys we'll talk to Greg in the last show about.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's been a great series with Greg, starting off from free agency, continuing through the NFL draft. And, I imagine we'll have Greg as part of our NFL draft coverage when it happens. It's going to be fantastic. So. By the way, we recently went over 13,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we want to, again, reiterate our appreciation for all of our listeners and viewers out there. You guys are tremendous. Your feedback is great, even if it's not positive feedback, and you tell us what you're looking for more or how we can improve. We appreciate everything. So, and again, you can always reach out to us at insidethebirds@gmail.com for questions. We're going to do an Ask ITB for all the people pretty soon. We just got to get through some of this draft stuff as well, but we haven't abandoned that for the people. We will do some episodes like that in the near future. As far as the next Intel or Greg Cosell for next week, we will be talking about running backs and wide receivers on that. Want to also say thank you and welcome to our newest Patreon subscriber, Francis. So really appreciate for him hopping aboard. Now, as he may have already found out, those Wednesday night Discord chats with Adam Caplan are it's like what would be the term? Not must see TV, but must ask internet.
must see chat transcript if you missed it. But we put an announcement there, which we're going to announce next week. I like to give if you're a Patreon subscriber, you get the information first before we announce it. Sometimes you get it a week in advance. So we're going to be announcing our draft coverage starting next week, what we're doing. One thing we definitely will tell you, if you're a Patreon subscriber and because we know we got like 20 new people in the last couple of weeks, we're going to announce this right now. We're going to do our live event, I think Tuesday night, 8 p.m., Tuesday the 25th. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think we said Tuesday the 25th.
right. Barring barring anything unforeseen, we're
Yeah.
going to do that, and that'll be at least an hour. And by the way, that's done through Zoom, so we could see all of you. It's super cool. And the last one, it got so big, like we fit all these people in there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I love it reminded me of like the Brady Bunch opening with all the pictures and people, and we're in the middle and all
Yes.
that. It was great. Some people are like, what the hell's the Brady Bunch? But we're getting all that.
Come on.
All right.
Yeah.
Inside the Birds, as of course, is presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the official Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. And man, Adam, the way the weather has been the last few days, it's hard not to think about summers at the shore and hot days. And I'm loving that, man. The weather's been nice. And of course, I'm sure, we're going to pay the price for another cold front like next week or a freaking thunderstorm or something, but the weather has been great lately and I have been loving it.
One thing I do want to say, like on Wednesday, it was in the mid 70s in Philly. How in the world in the Bronx, New York for the Phillies game was in low 50s? And I don't understand. I mean, it's not that far away.
This was, I know why. And I happened to be watching the news the night before, right? Tuesday night. Yeah. And Cecily did an unbelievable job of Cecily Tynan, of course, did a great job of breaking it down where the storm had this kind of strange, not storm, the jet stream had this strange shape, she was saying, where she called it a backdoor cold front, I think. It's almost like a sports term, right? Where Philadelphia and the surrounding area is getting that beautifully warm weather, but on the back end, like closer toward the shore and then up north to northwest, right? She said was going to be like a 15 to 20 degree difference. And then the weather itself was going to be terrible. So you're right. I forgot about it until the next day. So when first pitch for the Phillies game, right, I'm like, oh my God, it looks like it's like drizzling. It looks terrible. You see fans like all bundled up. And I walk outside my house, right, and it's like 78 degrees and it was beautiful. So it's amazing that you could be that close. Like New York City is not that far, especially for me. I'm in South Jersey. And it's like a 25-degree differential. That was
insane. Because I'm watching the game Wednesday. I'm like, why are they bundled up? Isn't it? So I'm looking at the weather.com app. That's what I use. It's generally hour by hour for those of us who travel a lot. It's a life. It's worth spending to get the premium app because that way it goes hour by hour, particularly if they have to fly. I was just curious, like, are we getting like a crazy front? It made me think of the craziness of the 13 Eagles game when the snow came out of the blue.
Oh, yeah. I think about like San Francisco Giants games where it's June and yet everybody's like all bundled up. Well, back when they played at Candlestick, mostly.
Well, no. I've been to, what do they call it? I don't know. They've changed the name.
I think it's now AT&T.
Okay, it used to be Pac Bell. So anyway, my wife and I, we were there for a 2-game series. We were traveling the coast, did Pebble Beach, did the whole, whatever they call it, the coast.
Beautiful. Yeah. Monterey.
Right, exactly. We did.
You did the 17-mile drive right around Carmel.
We did exactly
Northern
California, whatever it is. So anyway, Napa, of course, but so we didn't know. I mean, it's okay. It's like the water. It was unbelievable. So my wife bagged the second. She said, "I'm not going the next day." Hell with that. It's like, come on, this is unbelievable. I got to see the ball go the way.
I think was it Mark Twain who once said or wrote the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
Could be that wind, man.
Very true.
It was brutal off the water. It was awful in the 30s, and yeah, we weren't ready for that. But anyway, we done.
Yeah. Oh, I meant to. By the way, I got to give a shout out to Jasmine. Right, she's works in. I don't know her last name. Her name is Jasmine, and she works for the New Jersey car inspection centers. If you want to get your car inspected in New Jersey, there are centers where you can just bring it in. You go on a little line. They take care of it for you. So I bring it in. I get out of my car. She's looking at me like, squinted eyes. She goes, "Are you the Eagles guy?"
That's
and
awesome.
I was like, I didn't know how to take that because, some people have said I look like Nick Sirianni at times or sound like him. And I'm like, I say the Eagles reporter. She goes, yeah. I love your stuff. So I said, thank you. What's your name? She said, Jasmine. And I wasn't sure if sometimes I still get people who recognize me from CSN, right? Or radio. And she said at the end, she goes, I really love your podcast. I was awesome. Like, oh, she goes, you guys do a great job. So she obviously including you. So I said, that's great. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to thank her on the pod.
Awesome. Yeah. At the Super Bowl, you and I ran into a bunch of people listening to the show for Phoenix. It's actually really cool. it's always weird when somebody rolls down the window. You're like, oh, what's going to happen here? And they go, oh, I love your shovel cup. That guy.
Yeah, no, it is really strange, especially when you get it like thousands of miles away.
Yeah,
That's
it
always
is.
great.
No, but we really appreciate it.
All right, let's get into some of the pre-draft visits that we know about now.
And the process. Let's explain the process first.
Yeah, the process is really important. I have a funny story for this, but yeah, go explain.
So a lot of some of the reporting is wrong on this stuff. So what happens is, oh, the team's going to bring him in. Well, for a workout, you can't do that. The absolutely positively cannot work a player out at your facility with one exception. At the local pro day, when all the schools come out, I know Rasheed Bailey. I remember talking to Rasheed about that. When he was at Del Val, that actually helped him at the Eagles local pro day. Yeah, whenever that was, 2013, 2012, whenever Rasheed's now in the CFL. But
yeah,
those are very helpful because they get the look. Some kids who are completely under the radar at small schools locally, Delaware Valley. You could work the Temple kids out there, whatever local school. There's like a radius. You could actually work them out, but that's the only time you can work them out. Now, when you bring in one of you get teams that get they're called top 30 visits. You get up to 30. Believe this or not, some teams have told us they don't use all 30. I think it's stupid. Why wouldn't you do that? What, do you ever get a reason why they don't use them all?
No, I never really did. But the funny thing is that even the term top 30 visit is a misnomer. I get people telling me all that time. He goes, these aren't our 30th ranked players. You know, we got guys in here that we think are third and fourth round picks, but we like them or we had medical questions on them. I mean, a majority of these guys are going to be high picks that you're interested, but not all. So
no,
I think, so the term top 30 in itself is very much a misnomer for what it is.
Right. So what I'd add to that is, so what they do is they have, like the Eagles, for instance, we'll get into the top 15 players projected already. Van Ness, Carter, Bijan Robinson, we'll get into that. A couple other guys. But what they also do is, as personnel people tell us, is if they have a question, let's say they met with a player at the combine. Teams have told us before. Let's say it didn't go well, but they really like the player. They may bring the kid in. Maybe he was tired because some of these interviews at the combine are done late at night, like 11 o'clock, and guys are exhausted. So maybe the interview didn't go well. So they may have brought. There's not. It's not just they want the top players, and as you said, they may bring the guy who's projected to be a fifth round pick, but it also, by the way, you can give the player a physical. You do everything but work them out. They typically will meet with the front office officials, coaches. They're brought up to the chalkboard. You could keep them for as long as you need on one day. You could bring them in, but now there's a deadline. The deadline is is Wednesday the 19th. It's got to be a week before the draft. They used to do it exactly a week. Now they do it 8 days before. They have to be out of the building by midnight. It's like the language. So it's just kind of funny because teams will do this. They'll call the agent like, "Hey, we want to get your guy in. I know it's a terrible time. Could you do this? We'll pay for the flight, whatever the rules are. They'll get the guy in there because sometimes they do this, and sometimes like you'll get the visit and the club will say you cannot report this, or no, the agent will tell you. Like the Patriots notoriously will crush agents if certain visits are out. Like they'll yell at the agent. They'll threaten the agent. Oh, we'll never draft your player. Some teams actually do that.
Yep.
Most teams don't care. They know where it's coming from. When a reporter puts per source, he's visiting these 5 teams. Oh, gee, I wonder where it's coming from.
Yeah, right. By the way, I'm not a fan of this process. I feel like it could be better. I don't know that it's in the best interests all the time of the kids. I mean, you got guys like getting on airplanes, living out of hotels for 3 weeks, eating terrible food, like they're away from their families. It's a little much. I actually think that they should even have it cut off more than 8 days before the draft. I mean, it's a very mentally strenuous time, and I get it. You need to like find out as much about a player as you can, but there's also ways where NFL personnel can go see the player instead of having the player come see them. I just think it's a lot to ask. By the way, if you've ever flown on an airline recently, I mean, geez, to have to do this 3 or 4 times a week, going to different places. A lot of these guys are 6'6", 6'7", 300 pounds. You got to wedge yourself inside a commercial seat. It's not the most.
Don't take Frontier.
Life. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want them to take Frontier or let's just, and the other thing is if you don't have TSA pre, forget about it, man.
Yeah.
What a lifesaver that thing.
Plus all the storms that are happening in February and March.
March.
April, it's tough.
when I was flying up to the owners meetings last week, it was brutal. I was delayed 9 hours going up. Now, to save money, I took a connection, which I hate taking a connection, but anyway. Uh, but on your point about the visits and so forth, the thing is, if it didn't, like, you want to have these guys in because you don't, as clubs will tell you, the agents will have these kids coach really well, not only by themselves, by the agent, but
Definitely.
sometimes they have people who coach these guys how to interview. Well, they're not going to be able to do that very well when they're sent to a club's facility because these teams have all sorts of hours to deal with these kids.
Yep.
And they don't have any help there. Now, obviously, they've been coached somewhat, but it's a little bit different, and that's why clubs really want this done. Now, I've used this example before. Some clubs will let's say like Mike. Okay, here's the example. Mike Shanahan, when he drafted Jay Cutler, he purposely did not work him out. Didn't interview him anywhere. Combine, Senior Bowl, nowhere. They hid their interest. They didn't want anyone to know. It's like when Ryan Pace. It's too bad Ryan Pace didn't get this out with Trubisky in 2018 or 2017. As you and I were shocked, we were like, well, who the hell are they trading up for? Well, it was Mitch Trubisky, but that one they kept quiet. Like John Fox, like he found out, like Ryan Pace kept it from John Fox until a couple hours before the draft. So yeah, there are some times where it just doesn't get out. Like the Eagles thing, it basically was on Hurts. You reported what was that story again?
Yeah, how they had a separate like Microsoft Teams channel just for the pillars, where they were sort of making moves without anybody else knowing. Because
okay, it was a shock, yes, but so wow, I just don't understand. I don't.
Past is the past.
I know, but it was just so weird. Anyway,
It is.
That was 4 years ago, 2020. Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, look, moving this along here. So you have these visits that Geoff said. You always have a reason to do it. It's not just because they're going to have some of the top picks in. Obviously, they did. Now, what Andy Reid told me years ago when he was with Eagles is that he would sometimes they would use extra when they were done. Like let's say they had 3 or 4 visits left, they may have a kid in that they knew they weren't going to draft, but they would use that for free agency because they have. Oh, another thing, you could tape these interviews, so they would get it on tape because then if it went particularly well, they would recall on that how smart the kid is in the interview, and then was he get a good demeanor, was he a jerk, whatever the case may be. But they could go back and look at that if needed.
Definitely. All right, so that's the process. I mean, it's we've described it. I think we've given some idea of what it's like and some of the what it's like and also some of the misconceptions about it. Let's talk about some in a second. Some of the visits we know that have been to the NovaCare complex. First, we're going to say it's Ocean Casino Resort's 5th birthday this summer, and they can't wait to celebrate with you. Join Ocean for exciting promotions and sweepstakes, headline entertainment, the best day life and nightlife lineup in AC, the debut of the birthday bar, exclusive local collabs and partnerships, commemorative 5th birthday merchandise, and so much more. Don't miss stunning fireworks and unique events all summer long. Ocean Rewards members will enjoy over $5 million in gifts and prizes, so be sure to sign up for an Ocean Rewards card to get in on the fun next time you visit us. That's Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, the official Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. All right, let's go through some of the people who have visited the Eagles. I know there's one name that gets everybody percolated because he's a running back, Adam.
Oh, Bijan Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 2016, I remember
17.
when. What's that?
17, I think you mean. If
No,
you're
I'm
about to say what I
talking
think you are.
no, I'm talking about Ezekiel Elliott when he visited.
Oh, my fault. Go ahead.
Right, in 2016. So I remember I'm like, why are they having him in? They're not going to draft him, are they? So I remember checking in, and I was told no. I forget where they were. This is the Wentz draft anyway, wasn't it? 2016.
Yes.
So, but they had him in anyway. They wanted to get some information on him. So they did, but they knew they weren't going to draft him anyway. I just saw it's like, why would you waste a visit? Now I don't know then if it was one of the extra, like, were they done them all? Did they have a couple to to
Well, they had
use
like
whatever.
if they had moved up to 2 by pretty
Yeah,
early in the
I'm gonna
process. So if
draft it.
you've got 30
Yeah,
visits, but only 2 guys you got to choose from, and you already know which guy you're going to get, I
yeah,
guess
exactly.
you just you gather intel, right?
Sure. For the future, maybe, but anyway, he visited. So Bijan Rob. Now here's the thing. We're going to do in a couple minutes. We're going to get into the our initial intel in the top 10. It's by team need. We'll throw some players out, but it's more about team needs from what we're told. For people doing mocks, we're going to help you out here based on our early intel here, 3 weeks away. But so Robinson visited. I would be stunned if they drafted him if he's there at 10, only because they haven't drafted a. In fact, Keith Byars in 1986 really was a fullback. Then he did both for the Eagles, but he wasn't really a pure running back. So maybe folks watching now who are a little bit older, like Geoff and I, maybe they remember the last true running back the Eagles drafted in the first round. I just know Keith Byars, 1986, but he's more of a hybrid player. So I'd be shocked. It's not the way they do things, but I put out with you in 17 during the draft when you put me on the spot when we were on the Fanatic. He said, "Who they drafted?" I said, "I'm going to wind up regretting this one, but based on my intel, it's probably going to be McCaffrey, and shoot me if it doesn't happen if he's there." But and they didn't come close to doing it because he wasn't there. He wasn't even close to them.
Right.
So, but I mean, look, in terms of home run, he's a blue chip player. He's one of the elite players for this draft, no doubt. But I don't see it. But you never know.
Well, never do know. I had this conversation with Mike Gill on Football at 4 this week, and
Okay.
we talk about this on Inside the Birds a lot. I'd really love sort of a psychoanalytical evaluation of when the Eagles like make their board and rank their players, because at some point every team has to figure out how you rate a running back or any position player versus a different position player on the opposite side of scrimmage, like a tight end versus safety, a corner versus a right guard, right? I mean, they're elite at what they do, but you've got to build a board. And it's okay if you have guys with similar grades or numerical grades, whatever. Every team has their own system, but I do wonder if the Eagles again, it's not a conscious thing. I wonder if subconsciously they're able to take a great running back and a great defensive end and fairly rank them without having a bias toward the defensive end or the offensive tackle.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because
Positional bias.
because we know that there's positional priority. They'll be the first to tell you that. They don't shy away from that. But you also got to make sure that when you're doing your rankings and your hierarchy that you're not overdoing the priority part and making a lesser caliber player higher than another player because that guy plays a position you like more. And so I always wonder how they do this every year with running backs who are considered elite running backs in a group where there might also be elite defensive tackles and defensive ends and offensive tackles. I think it's a fair question to have about how that process is.
Sure. No, you brought this up before over the years. It's now this one's different because we'll get into this again in a couple minutes. But when you look at the edge rushers, a lot of good ones. Now, if you want to talk elite, I know one of the teams I talked to had they gave of one of their 11 first round grades. Tyree Wilson of Texas Tech was one of them. So, but as you learn as you talk to teams, not everybody all teams kind of like Tyree Wilson. That's not the issue. But to be a first round grade, you have to. The way the teams look at it is the tape has to show it that you could be a multiple Pro Bowler at the next level. That's how you're projected. If you're not, if you don't project this got to be a multiple Pro Bowler, you're not getting. You don't have first round grade. That's
right.
the way it works.
Right.
You don't just because the guy's the best player at the position doesn't make him give him a first round grade. It's all about what the tape tells you and how you project to the next level.
Right. Right. No, that's a good way to put it. All right. So we talked about Bijan. Let's go through some of the defensive players who have visited the Eagles. Some really interesting names there. Obviously, you mentioned already, Jalen Carter took a visit to the Eagles
a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So what I love to know, and we're starting to dig in on his situation, because it's real simple. Some teams are going to have him as the number one player for this draft. That you heard Crows this week, how much of a study is. And it would be something else if the Eagles drafted him at 10 to play with his former college teammate. It'd be crazy. But again, you have to get through the legal issue and what because you have to know whether it's a suspension coming. Can you trust him? It's everything. Can you trust him? You got to go deep into the background. You got to go to high school. These first round picks, particularly guys who have off the field issues, you got to go back really, really far, and that's just the way it is. So, yeah, he's a guy that is immensely talented, Jalen Carter, but you got to be able to trust him.
And there's no question that the Eagles have placed a high priority on first, second, maybe even third round, high picks, early picks, day 1 and day 2 picks. Character is big for them. You'll notice the trend. I mean, most of the guys they've picked in the first and second and third rounds from probably the last 5, 6, 7 years have very, very few, if any, question about like character question. Maturity is different, but like
Exactly.
even that, they've picked some pretty mature kids. I mean, you can't be 100% with everyone, but most of the kids they've taken have had really clean records as far as, whether it's legally or just how they're judged and how they lead and are just really are good, intelligent kids. I mean, it's what they've done. That's
Yeah,
what
and that's why
and Howie has talked about that. He's been open about it.
That's why they've been able to not rebuild, retool the thing when we all kind of thought after Doug was fired, well, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get back. Oops, no, it didn't.
Right.
21, they somehow made the playoffs after the debacle of 2020 and just got to the Super Bowl. So yeah, and we've talked. Remember what we talked about for those of you who've been with us a while? Was it 2019 or 2020? When was the receiver room awful? When was Fulgham here? 2020?
2020. Let's see. They won the Super Bowl in 2017. Had a few injuries there in 18, but then 19 and 20 got really bad. Yeah,
it was
Fulgham
really
was
bad.
20.
Right. Okay, they had to rebuild that room. It was an absolute disaster. They needed some alphas, and oh my goodness gracious,
Right.
rebuild that thing and rather quickly.
Yeah.
Really. They saw what everyone else is. If you really, really follow the team closely, you knew that room was too young, too immature, and they needed leaders. And my God, I mean, you couldn't nail it any better than Devontae Smith and AJ Brown.
Yeah, and Jalen Hurts. I mean,
sure. Oh, yeah.
Absolute leader.
Yeah.
Great character, no doubt about it.
Exactly. So, and Howie, when he missed, it's more about the tape, missing on the tape rather than the character of the kid.
Right.
For the kids over the years, but he's got it right now. They've got a really mature roster, and that's I mean they're definitely primed. Although look, we said in the last show that the defense needs some help. There's no reason why they can't go deep in the playoffs next year if they need a little bit of help on defense. But with this offense, there's no question they could go far.
Sure. All right. Other people that we've known visiting the NovaCare complex. You've got the Iowa defensive end, Lucas Van Ness, who's a really interesting player that we've talked about. One guy that we've talked about with Greg Cosell, and he really kind of turned the light on for us to this guy. Defensive tackle from LSU, Jaquelin Roy. I hope I'm pronouncing that name
right.
I
Did.
think it's
no. In fact,
Roy.
remember, I was like, is it Jacqueline? He goes,
right.
You gotta be careful.
They call him Jacqueline. Yikes.
Yeah, there's a javelin in the NFL, Javelin Guidry. But
Javelin Guidry, right.
Now again, just so you know, some of these are scheduled visits.
We know for a fact that's true. I don't know if Ray has visited them yet.
Right, I don't know yet. I know Emmanuel Forbes. We'll get to him in a second. I know he's on their list.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go over we get them every year. We'll go over the full 30 once they're completed, and we'll go, okay. Now, there's another thing. There's a tell that all teams have. I was probably the only reporter for from 2002 through 2012 would literally track over 400 visits per year. I was obsessive with it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a positional profile. I did it because I was crazy. I did mock drafts with my, and I was like, look, we need to kind of clue into what teams how they see their needs. And it was like clockwork. If a team brought in 10 defensive tackles, they were absolutely drafting one. They might draft one high, and it was like every year it was the same thing. It's not 100%, but it's pretty close to if they bring in a lot of players more than other positions.
Mm-hmm.
It's the position they bring in the most. They're drafting the guy fairly high, and it would happen. So we're going to look at these Eagles things, and we'll look at last year to see if there are any tells. But that's what we look for. And Van Ness is a guy who Greg likes a lot, and Greg Cosell likes it. We've talked to a lot of people around the league. He's Greg and I came with the same comparison. Zach Allen, who signed a guy, by the way, Eagles were very interested in, but they were not interested in his money. He got way overpaid, $15 million. But you know what? Good for him. Free agency, guys get overpaid. And the Broncos wanted him.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he's what we call a multi-lineman player, Van Ness. You can line him at the end. You can line him up the nickel inside. You can probably stand him up. He's got it. He's the kind of guy, this is what the draft's about. It's not so much his production in college. It's how you see him at the next level going forward. He's one of those guys.
Amazingly thing is he didn't even start at Iowa. He's sort of like
That's
this
why
rotation.
I brought that up. Exactly.
Yeah,
Point.
yeah.
Right. Because he wasn't technically a starter, but you're looking down the road. Where's my guy going to be 3 or 4 years from now? We'll see who drafts him. But the conversation with Van Ness is going to be in the back of the top 10. His floor is probably 18 to 20. And the beginning of him potentially being drafted is at the back of the top 10.
All right. And then you already mentioned Emmanuel Forbes, the Mississippi State or Miss? I think
Mississippi State. Yeah, and he's
Mississippi State cornerback. Guy weighs about 165 pounds on a good day.
Right. And he's another guy that we need to dig on and see, because he's really gifted. But is it a turnoff when you're only, I mean, this is how skinny he is. He's just under 6'1", 6'0", 6 foot and 3/4 of an inch, 166 at the combine. Oh boy.
Yeah. He remind me, he played in the SEC, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Played a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it. Okay. That's just my own
Oh, because he gets glass.
You play a couple of years, you're starter, you're in the SEC, you're I think you're all right. You probably play some pretty tough football.
Well, and then the thing with him is he outside combo corner, inside outside?
Good question.
Like,
yep.
Right, is he zone corner man? Like Greg may see him one way, but we need to dig a little bit more in how NFL teams see him.
Yeah.
So,
well, he can run. I mean, there's no question about that. So you would think he'd be an outside, but again, you never know. Teams might see it differently.
Oh my goodness gracious! He ran a 4.35. His 10-yard split was oh man.
Yeah.
By the way,
he's going to get drafted high. I think
vert was just under 38, which is really good. Broad jump is 10.4, which is solid, pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, and clubs love that he did everything. Good for him, man.
Yeah,
good for him.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to go continue to talk about the Eagles at 10 and then try to get an idea of what they're looking at while they're there. First, we're going to take a quick break to hear from some of our great sponsors. All right, Adam. At 10, a lot of people you mentioned it earlier. People say, well, shouldn't the Eagles trade down because they don't have any picks in the 3rd and 4th and what is it, 5th round too? I think they have no picks from. No. They have a 3rd round pick. They don't have a 4th round
4th
pick.
or 6th, right?
4th, 5th, and 6th, right? But as you mentioned, it's not just so easy to trade down. There's got to be someone at 10 that teams are going to want to trade up for.
Yeah.
And if all 4 quarterbacks are gone, obviously. There's other positions. The Eagles traded up twice the last 2 years. Once was a D tackle, the other was a wide receiver. So it doesn't have to be quarterback. But if you want to haul, it helps when it's a quarterback.
Yeah, and a couple things. Okay, so they have 2 firsts, a 2nd, 3rd, and 2 7ths.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at their situation at 10, as we dig into this thing, here's what we know. We know 2 quarterbacks are going to the top 10. That's a lock.
Yes. And they're going to be the first 2 players taken, right?
We know exactly. Right, exactly. So what we just don't know is, will someone trade up for Richardson?
Right.
That he's sort of the wild card here, because there's so many teams that still need a quarterback for the future. Like the Panthers, okay, they have Andy Dalton he's an outstanding backup. He's a short-term starter if you need him to, but we know they're going quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted a good veteran to back up their rookie quarterback. Okay. We know the Texans need a quarterback. They don't have any choice. Now, they do pick at 11, I think.
Right.
Yeah, they are 12. I'm sorry. That was from the Browns trade. Yeah, for the Watson trade. So, but I mean, could they take because they have so many needs: quarterback, center, wide receiver. Well, they're not going to take a center there, but edge rusher, corner. They need corner for the future. Remember, Stephen Nelson is there. Was on last year's 2-year deal, but they have to get a quarterback out of this draft. They can't compete unless they get a quarterback. So after that, though, where's Will Levis going to go? He could go anywhere in the top 20.
I think Levis is the biggest wild card. I mean, I think he could go in the top 10. He might not go in the top 10. I think Anthony Richardson's going to wind up going higher than him.
No, I agree with you. Probably will, but if Richardson doesn't go to the Colts. Chris Ballard is more conservative. He doesn't really take a lot of chances. And the Seahawks, Gino's starting this year based on what he's being paid, but after this, they can get out of the contract.
But
Now,
wait,
would
Adam,
they?
even with being conservative, the Colts don't have a quarterback right
No, they
now.
don't. They have to get one. I hear
Yeah, they
you.
have to take a quarterback,
But
right?
I'm
Unless they're
what
getting
I'm saying,
Lamar.
right? But no, but what I'm saying is, I'm just talking about the player Richardson. He's
Okay.
clear boomer bust. He's only started 1 year. The history of quarterbacks has only started 1 year in college. It's not very good. The success at the next level.
Right.
Chris knows this. He has this data that goes back to the '60s. All teams do.
Mm-hmm.
So, is Bryce Young not going to go 1 or 2? We'll see. But it's just. But as on your earlier point, yeah, part of the Eagles getting the player they covet, part of it's going to be, do the quarterbacks drop down? Who wants to trade up? If anybody? No. Okay, let's say that 4 quarterbacks go before the Eagles. Okay, so that would hurt their value a little bit. But is there an edge rusher? Do one of the edge rushers drop? Look, the Eagles traded for a receiver. Now right now it looks like a brilliant trade for Devontae Smith. Not something typically you do, but it turned out to be a great decision.
Yeah.
Is there an edge rusher? If Tyree Wilson is there at 10, because there's a drop off in the edge rusher group. Van Ness is an edge rusher technically, but he's built differently than Smith.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, is it because you don't, people think they know what teams are going to do, but you don't really know because they have better access than we all do. But to finish this off on that discussion, this is not the elite draft. This is just not. There's no Sauce Gardner in this draft other than Jalen Carter, but he's got major legal issues to get through. So you just don't know. And again, teams are still trying to figure that one out.
What I'm fascinated by is the idea of cornerbacks. Like we know the history of the draft is that this is a position where you see a run on it. Like once one gets off the board, all of a sudden the others start to go pretty quickly. And in a draft that lacks elite wide receivers, elite safeties, elite offensive linemen, to be fair, this is not a great offensive line draft either, especially at tackle. You wonder if there will be, do you think 3 corners could go before 10?
Gonzalez, Witherspoon. I don't say a lot, but I think it's a pretty good bet. And then after that,
maybe Joey Porter Jr.
I see him. The Eagles won't take a corner that early. They certainly could use a guy to replace one of the 2 veterans, but they won't. I'm sure they won't do that.
You don't think the Eagles would take a cornerback at 10?
No, I don't think they would do it. Now, if you and I were doing it, I would do it. If our grade said so, yes.
Right.
But I don't think Howie. If they stay 10. Now I say that
you don't think the Eagles would take one of these corners at 10 because they certainly would have taken Patrick Surtain a couple of years ago.
But guess what? Surtain is a higher quality.
Right.
Player.
What you're saying is these guys are not going to convince Howie Roseman that it's worth it because they're not maybe can't miss guys. Okay.
And I love the way you set that up because Sauce Gardner and Surtain were elite, like elite of the elite.
Right.
And so is J.C. Horn. Those 3 corners were like if 3 teams at 1, 2, and 3 needed corners, they're taking those guys. So that's how elite these guys are. They're going to be multiple Pro Bowlers. Horn's had some injuries, but he's good. His tape is very good so far. The Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
So that you nailed it. That I don't see it, but we don't have access to what Howie's thinking. But I'm looking at the history. But you and I think a little differently than Howie does, and it's obviously it's hard to knock the Eagles' history of drafting defensive and offensive linemen, just the way that they think on how you develop a team.
100%.
This is why they've been so good for so long, other than 2020, of course. But I don't see them being that elite. Is the kid from Oregon very good? Yes, he's very good. Is he? Some teams will have him as one. He definitely has a first-round grade from teams, but is he elite? Like the guys we were talking before, I don't think so.
I would have to agree with you. In fact, I'm very surprised in some of the conversations. You know how sometimes it's not like when you're talking to a personnel person or a scout, it's not what they say, but what they don't say that really stands out to you. So I haven't heard anybody say anything bad who I've spoken to about Christian Gonzalez. The traits are the traits. They're fantastic. He can run, he can jump, he can do this. I mean, he's a great athlete and he's played the position well, but it's weird that when I talk to people who've watched a lot of his tape, and then I maybe ask about Witherspoon or Porter or somebody else, I don't see like the same excitement about Christian Gonzalez that I hear in like Witherspoon. People love how much he's a fighter, like
Yeah,
aggressive, physical, only weighs 180 pounds, but he plays like he's 220. Same thing you hear about Joey Porter Jr., physical, aggressive, very handsy. So there are some negatives there. But I have not heard the same things about Christian Gonzalez about just that. Oh man, I've really enjoyed watching this as I've heard about other guys, and that sort of makes me wonder, right? Because when you sort of, if you're only following the mock draft world or the TV draft analyst world, Christian Gonzalez is like a top 5 pick, and he's the best
sure.
corner, and he's awesome. But you and I are sort of, I believe, getting the same sort of feel from talking to people. Like there's something missing there, like that you just don't get the excitement and that you hear about other guys.
I would say that at least 3 people I really trust who work for NFL teams don't agree with Greg's analysis. They like Gonzalez, and I'm sure he's going to go in the top 10.
Right, and
His
just for
teams ain't
perspective,
corners.
for people who haven't heard, Greg really liked Christian Gonzalez a lot too. He loves his
Thinks
team.
he's the best corner. Yeah, and
Right.
he, by the way, he may be right over
Sure,
3 years. The first 3 years, he might be right. But
sure.
and when we do this little exercise in a minute here, we're going to put him in the top 10. But it's just one of the things I love about this thing that we do here, what we're doing right now in particular, is I like comparing notes with different coaches and front office people, because you could look at they're looking at the same tape, but yet they see it differently. It's just amazing to me, and without bias. I'm like, well, how do you not see this? I can't. Maybe they learn differently. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is fascinating. I almost want to do more work on that, just to get,
We will,
because you
definitely.
do a good job of this, and I need to do better of also getting coaching sources on this,
I
because
talked to a lot
sometimes
of
coaches
coaches,
see
man.
it differently
Yeah.
than scouts. So
I mean, I'll give you an example. Christian Watson last year. So many coaches I've talked to, they love the kid, but they said he was. I mean, I know a coach who gave him a 5th round grade. Now he got off to a terrible start, dropping passes left and right. Second half of the season, he dominated for the Packers. Great kid, great size, good run. Roger started trusting him, but coaches could only go by what they see,
right,
and they look at it differently than GMs do, and personnel directors and
no doubt
scouting
about it.
directors. That so that's another thing we'll talk more about.
Right.
We're going to try to get Paul Gunther on soon, the former Raiders D coordinator, to talk about that. That's actually a great subject, because it is remarkable to me when we talk to coaches and the executives and they look at the same tape. I'm like, why are you not saying the same thing? What's the issue here?
Right. All right. So we're going to run through it. We're going to do our quick mock 1 through 10, just to see
more
what we
positional
get.
needs.
Sure. Based on positional needs. Exactly. So before we do that, just want to tell everybody to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams, for the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. Make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation. And we'll pause real quick to hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. And let me quickly plug the Powder Blue podcast that I do with Phillies insider Frank Close. It's a great Phillies podcast. We had Chad Durbin, World Series champion Chad Durbin, on with us in our latest episode, and he kind of ran through what he thought was going wrong there in the inauspicious 1-5 start and what might turn it around. But it was always good to catch up with a World Series champion. And Chad Durbin, he's really good, by the way, Adam. I don't know if you've heard him. He's a really good analyst of the game.
Got great energy.
Yeah, very good energy. So please subscribe to Powder Blue Podcast.
Yeah, and now is it just podded? It's not YouTube?
Right now it's just on the podcast, every podcast platform, but it'll soon to be brought to YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, and then was Durbin he was a setup, right?
He was, yeah.
I thought so. Okay.
Middle inning guy.
Okay, here we go.
All right. So our top 10 here. Panthers. They need a quarterback. They need a lot of things. Well, they don't need a lot of things. They actually have a very good defense, but
They need
need a
this is
quarterback.
from team sources and league sources who evaluated the Panthers roster. They need a quarterback, obviously. They need another pass rusher. They're transitioning fully. They've run a 34 before. They've run a hybrid. When Phil Snow was there, the former D coordinator, he went sort of a hybrid scheme. This is going to be a pure 34 with Ejiro Oviro, who's coming up from Denver, who's a Vic Fangio disciple. So they're going to run the Fangio system. So they need quarterback, DN, pass rusher, wide receiver, corner. Now they need corner because not they're drafting one at one, but Dante Jackson's come back, I believe, a torn Achilles. CJ Henderson's on the final year of his rookie deal. And Horn had some injuries, so they need another corner, but that's later on. But those are the positions. Obviously, they're going quarterback. It's either going to be Young, or it's either going to be
Young or Stroud, I would think, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be Richardson. So yeah, there's just they're not. That'd be. Why would you trade up to one to get Richardson? I mean, that would be crazy. So yeah, Stroud or Young, and then the Texans also. We're going to give them a quarterback here. They have they just have a bad roster. It's just awful. It's like basically they're an expansion team, and it looks like an expansion roster again. Quarterback, center, wide receiver, DN, corner. They're doing a lot. So as one executive told me when he goes, man, Nick continues to tape job this roster. He doesn't understand why. They have all this cap space. Get some really good free agents, but Caserio, the GM of the Texans, for some reason, I mean, he has personnel control. Look, he's still starting to build the offensive line, but it's like they keep Jerry Hughes, who's 35 years old. Bernard he didn't pick him. I don't think he was a underrated defensive end, but Denzel Perryman, Corey Littleton at linebacker, Christian Kirksey. Okay, all these journeyman linebackers. Jimmy Ward, who's a good. He moved from safety to nickel, but he's had a ton of injuries. He's now playing safety again because obviously D'Amico wanted him. Desmond King's a journeyman corner. Eric Murray's a journeyman safety. You just look at Hassan Ridgeway. Yeah, he's a good backup, another 49er. Blake Collins, a journeyman. Sheldon Rankin's a guy's been around. How are you building this team? I don't know what Casario's doing. And by the way, he'll live to regret. He drafted by scheme. He passed on Sauce Gardner and drafted Stingley. Stingley had an injury history coming in. He was hurt last year. He's probably going to be a pretty good player. But Sauce Gardner has a chance to be a Hall of Fame player. I know it's a lot to say. That was a major mistake. I don't know why you would do that for the life of me.
Yeah, I wonder who's going to get. That's going to get blamed on Lovey as somebody gets shown the door because that'll be the convenient.
But that's fine. But you know what? Casario's personnel control. You got to draft.
I agree.
Like when Chip Kelly drafted, he did not want Aaron Donald because of the length and he's too small. Draft the damn best player.
Yep.
Then figure it out as you go along. I know teams say, "Oh, we're always going to draft the best player," and they don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a mistake. I mean, he's obviously going to be a Hall of Famer. That was, he didn't fit a 34 front. Guess what? The Rams have run a 34 front quite a bit over the years.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, all right, we go quarterback for the Panthers Texans. I'm kind of hoping that it goes Stroud, Bryce Young, only because what do I have as a reporter to root for or anything? I like D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah,
I'm kind of hoping he takes this awful franchise that has been nothing for, even when they were making the playoffs with Bill O'Brien, they weren't doing anything, right? I would love to see D'Amico succeed, and I kind of think I like Bryce Young a lot. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback.
And it's his ties to the program. Bryce Young is the best quarterback for this draft. I'm talking to people, but the problem is the body type.
Yeah.
You're worried about that frame, but here's a nugget for you. So one of the teams that got in front of him already said, you know what? Yeah, he's not tall, but he's not rail thin. He's not quite as I guess if you watch him on TV, maybe at the combine, he also didn't look big or whatever. Like he not that he's filled out. I guess he was over 200 pounds at the combine or whatever he was.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't look as small up close as this team anticipated. So we'll see. But yeah.
One thing that people should keep in mind about this kid, Adam, is that of all the quarterbacks that come through Alabama in the last 4 or 5 years, this past year, right? This is like the first year Alabama doesn't have two guys going in the top 10 at wide receiver, like two top 10 wide receiver. I'm not saying they're wide receiver bad. I'm just saying it's not Jerry Jeudy and it's not Devontae Smith and it's not Jalen. I mean, Alabama was pumping out guys who might all be future Hall of Famers and things like that. Their receivers are good, but I think Bryce did an amazing job with an offensive skill set that doesn't necessarily stack up to the ones that the guys who came before him had. So I just happen to think he's going to be really good.
His ability, if he stays healthy, his ability to process is elite. He's one of the part of the elite group of players for this draft.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 12 to 15-year starter if he can stay healthy. It's just a matter of he weighed 204 at the combine, which is he was up in weight because whether he had protein shakes or whatever, no one really knows. But
right.
The hope is he could put some bulk on his frame, to
Sure.
hold up. Because you see Tua, another former Alabama quarterback, who's 6 feet, between 6 and 6'1", and he physically is just not built strong enough. You worry about that.
Definitely. All right, so quarterback, 1, 2. Cardinals are up, and they're the first sort of wild card of the draft with the new regime. Monty Ossenfort, the GM, who came over from Tennessee, right?
Yes, and exactly. Worked with Bijan Robinson, the former. They worked together for the Pats. So anyway, they need so much. Was it you who brought up like 2 years ago? Weren't they in the playoffs 2 years ago?
They
They might have had the best record for like the first like 8 to 10 weeks. Like they were really good, and then they completely fell off.
Yep.
So anyway, they need pass rushers. Remember, J.J. Watt retired. Chandler Jones is long gone with the Raiders. They need pass rushers in the biggest way. They need interior offensive linemen. Kelvin Beachum resigned, but to a very low-end deal. But they need a future right tackle. They need corners are very weak there. They need D-line help. So you take – now, I know Greg Cosell's not a fan of Will Anderson. He says he's a good player, but he doesn't think – I don't know. I'll have to ask Greg when we have him on next. Does he think he's an elite player or just very good? But didn't sound like he thought he was elite. But he's the next best – he's – I mean, look, you could say that depending on how you look at this draft, you could say Tyree Wilson's a better pass rusher than Will Anderson. I wouldn't knock you if you said that.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the school, points of the pedigree, he's probably going to go high. And I'm going to put him.
I would say the one thing that maybe to look out for here, just because of Jonathan Gannon's background and the fact that, he's like the prince of wherever he goes. I wouldn't dismiss maybe a corner. Just thinking that if they have the same opinion that Will Anderson is a good player, but not as elite as maybe it seems that he is, and they're not going to take a quarterback there, and they don't have any other first-round pick, I don't think. So I wouldn't shock me if maybe they went corner there.
Well, I know he had told the Eagles when he first got the job that he didn't need elite corners. He could win. Maybe that's why they signed Nelson.
Good point.
He said, as long as I have a great pass rush, I can
handle
it. Here's why I'm bringing this up. You just said it. Nelson, they had to protect him. He could not run the defense year one like the way he wanted to.
Right.
They signed Bradbury. They had Slay, and off we go. They were elite. They're the best secondary in football.
Yeah.
Pretty much in terms of production given up. So we'll see it's a fair point. Look, they need corners. They're brutal there, so they have to do something, but they could wait.
Yep.
But we'll give them Anderson again. They're going with a edge pass rusher or a corner.
There you go. All right, the Colts are up next at 4. I think we pretty much said that they can't take anything other than a quarterback here. It would be the biggest upsets unless they get one, unless they get Lamar or something, which I don't think is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bauer's on record saying they're looking into it, but yeah, and of course you have to pay him. So then the Seahawks are next at 5, and they got this pick in the Russell Wilson trade. Their needs, they can't even line up. They don't even have 2 starting D tackles right now. They need D tackles, center. They need a guard. They're good at tackles. They finally got it. They finally solved that issue with their bookend tackles. And they run a 34 front. They moved to 34 last year. A lot of people don't really realize this, but that's really what they ran. I'll tell you, and I know that, and it's funny. They took picture. I guess they interviewed Richardson at the pro day and had a private meeting with him. I guess they took pictures. To me, that's just too like, okay, guys, we want you to know about Richardson because come on, try to trade up or something. Who knows? Because John Schneider loves to trade down. He's one of the old-time trade down guys.
Yeah.
So, but they need, and they've taken character risk players before. Would it surprise you if they took Jalen Carter?
No.
It's a major need.
Not at all. In fact, it would surprise me if they didn't, based on
Really?
yeah.
Really? They didn't.
Well, listen, I don't have the luxury of sitting down with Jalen Carter and asking him a lot of questions. I don't know what the Seahawks know or what they feel truly inside about Jalen Carter. I only know what everybody else knows about some of the off the field stuff that and the car thing. So, but like you just said it, that this is sort of a perfect match for who they are, for what they do, and as long as if they don't feel like he's really a flawed human being with a terrible character that they could never draft, I wouldn't surprise. I mean, I would be more surprised if they didn't draft him.
Okay.
But again,
Okay.
that's just based on what I know. I don't know what what they know about him.
Sure. All right. So that's at 5. At 6. This is from the Stafford trade, the Lions. Their needs are obvious. They need a pass rusher. They need a tight end, but they're not drafting tight end this early because they traded Hawkinson to the Vikings, and they need another corner. They did. Cam Sutton has definitely started. Then Okuda's. They have to make a decision on his 5th-year option after the draft. They need another corner, and they signed the kid from Mosley from the Niners, but he's on a 1-year deal, low-end deal, and also he's come back from a torn ACL. So they need a corner. I think Tyree Wilson should be in the conversation here. Christian Gonzalez, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a corner, they need a corner. Their offense is terrific. They have no weaknesses, really. Honestly, they're good at running back now. They've got Montgomery. He's their lead back. Jared Goff, really, he was the comeback player of the year for me. He was terrific last season. The line is great. They've got 5 starters. They're great. There's 2 deep, almost a receiver. They're going to be 11 personnel team.
Yeah.
So why not go defense? We're going to give him Christian Gonzalez here.
Okay. I don't know.
I like.
I see why you would do that, and certainly need a corner.
I just don't know. If
Knowing Dan Campbell and what he looks for in a prospect, and then knowing some of the things we've heard about Christian Gonzalez compared to, say, a Witherspoon,
not physical enough,
or a Porter. I also think that there's going to be part of Dan Campbell and that defensive staff that's going to look at Lucas Van Ness and get really in love with him. Or as you said, Tyree Wilson.
But why not Devin? Okay, let's go back before we move on to the Raiders. And both teams, ironically, need a corner. The Raiders have the worst cornerback group of football in the NFL. So why not Witherspoon here? Because remember, Witherspoon, as Greg told us, and the people we spoke to have said the same thing about this kid.
Yep.
He's so in your face and physical. He's only 180, but he's in your face and tough. Not the greatest athlete in the world, but good enough.
Mm-hmm. And look, man, if they can actually get Okuda to play at decent level, because they signed Cam Sutton,
yeah.
If they like Witherspoon as a physical slot receiver, that gives them
corner.
Physical slot corner. Yeah, that might give them what they're looking at. I mean, listen, Okuda, the experiment might be over, but I don't know. He's still under contract, but because we know that Witherspoon is someone who could project to play the slot because of his size.
Yes.
I feel like Witherspoon or Porter just fit the Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn profile more from what we know about their aggressiveness than maybe Christian Gonzalez.
No, what we don't know, because I've not heard him going this early. No, we're still exactly 3 weeks away, so we need to do more digging on Porter. Is we need to talk to more teams and see is there a possibility he can go top 10. Because again, Gonzalez is not physical enough. See, teams don't agree with Greg. They don't. Greg kind of said, "Oh, he'll be physical when he needs to," but we've heard he's not physical enough. But he might be the most talented corner. He's got length, athleticism, good kid. But you want him to be more physical. Where Witherspoon may not be as gifted as Gonzalez, but he's physical and he gets all of that 180 pounds. And you talk about Joey Porter, he sure does, who's got length and competitiveness, and obviously son of Joey Porter, longtime physical linebacker for the Steelers. But so let's do this. Let's give Witherspoon at 6.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to the Raiders, who have to draft a corner here. They're not doing a right tackle here. I don't see them doing Skoronski, and they need one more receiver, but they could do that much later.
Yeah.
Let's give them Gonzalez here. We'll do both corners, Gonzalez and Witherspoon, the top 2.
I think that makes sense. We know the Raiders, they're run by the former Patriots people, Ziegler, and so they're going to place high emphasis on secondary players.
Yes. So those guys are off the board. Now the Falcons at number 8 need a receiver to go with London. Zacchaeus is Olamide Zacchaeus is a free agent. They did sign Matt Collins, but I mean he's a good rotational speed guy.
Pitts is coming off the injury.
Who's that?
Pitts.
Yep. need another pass target. Corner, they need Casey Hayward, who's one of their starting corners, is 33 years old. It's amazing he's still playing. Give him credit from all the concussions he had earlier in his career, but he's doing a good job. But they need to replace him. They have a terrible pass rush, and they run a 34 front. They need a stand-up pass rusher. Could be Tyree. To me, this is where if you don't get Joey Porter here, I know this is a little early potentially. If you don't get Joey, based on our mini mock here, if they don't get Joey Porter here, you're not getting one of those guys. I don't see it. Tyree Wilson, the conversation also starts with him here. Who would you put here? I'd
probably go with Tyree Wilson because they really need an outside pass rusher.
Badly, yes.
They have AJ Terrell, who's been a pretty decent corner for them.
He's really good. No, he's
actually pretty good. Yeah. So it lessens sort of. I know you're not supposed to do on need, just best player, but they've always needed somebody to go along with Grady Jarrett. They needed somebody to rush the pass from the outside. I know they recently signed Calais Campbell. He's a rotational guy. Onyemata, they've worked on the interior of their defensive line, but they need somebody who can come off the edge.
In fact, Eddie Goldman came out of retirement, I think, so he's back on the roster. So they need a younger D lineman, but they run a 30 for front. They need pass rusher. Caden Ellis is a decent pass rusher, one of the 3 Ellis kids who came up from the Saints, great story development, but he's not. Yeah. Evan Caddy was not that much of a factor last year.
Yeah, my guy, Arnold D.
Yeah, and then Lorenzo Carter came over from the Giants. He's average. They need as Bill Polian said to me so many times over the years, always take an upgrade.
Yeah.
Tyree, let's put Tyree Wilson there. I like your point. Let's put Tyree Wilson.
Definitely.
Okay. And then 9, this is from the Panthers. Their needs are obvious. Worst pass rush in the NFL last season.
It's the Bears, right? You said Bears from the Panthers?
Yep, Bears from Panthers. Yep. We want a 43 front. They need DN, D tackle. They need an offensive lineman. But this is where the conversation starts with Lucas Van Ness. And Joey Porter's there, but they don't need a corner. So let's put Van Ness there.
Yeah, I would put Van Ness there. Absolutely.
Over Skoronski. I know a lot of people put Skoronski there, but.
Yeah, I'll tell you the real quick thing on Skoronski. And, you and I, I know we went through this with Rashawn Slater and Penny Sewell with short arms and whether he's a guard or a tackle. And sometimes we would get different information. This time I feel more, I remember saying that people I was talking to felt that Slater could be a tackle and Sewell could play a tackle even with the short arms. I get more of Skoronski as a guard though. I don't get a whole lot of, we can see him playing tackle. I get more that he's a guard. That's what I get.
And the teams that, it's been 3 years now, but I just remember some teams like, nope, he's a guard for us. We can't take him this early.
Right.
The Chargers credit. I know he got hurt, but he's been really good.
Yeah.
So look, if you've got great technique and you're pretty sharp, like he is, remember his dad, Reggie Slater, was an NBA player, played for the Timberwolves. His dad, power forward. If you can make up with hand usage and technique, look, I know it's not always ideal because longer arm ends could get into you, but he's really good and he's made up for it. So let's put Van Ness there.
Okay.
And he'll start day one. Like he might be the best pass rusher the day that he's drafted. And then the Eagles from the Saints.
Well, in our scenario, right? So we gave the Colts a quarterback.
Yes.
We didn't say who. I guess you would say, would you say Levis over Richardson since he's sort of conservative?
I have no idea. I just know Chris Ballard, just what he thinks. This would surprise me if he went with Richardson, but you know what?
I would think with Shane Steichen there, you would go with Richardson just because of what he's done in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts and
that's it. Well, that's part of why I wanted. That's what I was getting to. So Shane is coached guys who can move, who could play an RPO based system. They definitely, that's what you're doing with the coaches who I've spoken to already. Absolutely would do that. And the funny thing is, here's another nugget on Richardson. This is really interesting. So, a couple guys were at his pro day said that. I know he goes, this will shock you because these guys were coming back. They were in the same car. It was, you're not gonna believe this, but he's super developed with legs and calves and legs, but he's not. He has room to. He's 245, but he could ball. Like he has room. His body, like his lower body's bigger than his upper body. Like, what are you going to make him 260? I was like, okay, I don't know. I've seen the guy with his shirt off. I don't know what he looks like, but I was just thought it was funny. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Right. So, but now his technique, he needs a lot of work with technique, but Shane Steichen is there, and who's the Colts quarterbacks coach?
Oh, no, I don't remember the quarterbacks. Yeah, the quarterbacks coach was the guy who was named offensive coordinator, right? When they fired
Oh, isn't Billy Joe? Not Billy. No, Jim Bob Cooter's the OC.
no,
I knew
he's the
that was
offensive
the
coordinator. Who was the guy who got called the play caller when Jeff Saturday took over? It was like
Oh
he was
no,
up in
it's
the
no. I know he's still in the. Well, Cam Turner's the quarterbacks coach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know who. Reggie Wayne's the receivers coach.
Right. Oh yeah, Cam
The
Turner, that's right.
I think that kid went to Carolina with Frank. The
Yeah,
kid,
you're right. He did. He did.
Pat, what was his name? Parks Overall. Park
Parks
Overall.
something. Parks something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Park Overall somewhere. Oh, but
Wait, can I just bring something up because maybe there
yeah.
might be a little bit of a flaw in our top 9 here in
All
that
right.
we sort of just gave the Falcons a pass rusher and considered it over a cornerback, but not
Yeah.
a quarterback.
Well, here's the thing. They overspent on Taylor Heinicke. Really gave him a ridiculously good deal.
They did, which kind of makes you think that they think that he's going to have to play early.
Well,
Maybe not start. That almost feels like
Ritter's,
it almost feels like they think they're going to get either Levis or Richardson, but they may
Ah.
not be able to start those guys for the first.
I'm not seeing it like that. I mean, they're paying. It's not a terrible. I mean, it's $7 million a year. It's a little bit higher than you would expect for an acquired taste.
What did they sign him for again? Heineke?
2 years and $14 million.
Yeah, $7 million. That's a high end backup money. That's not starting quarterback money, right?
It's good backup money, but it's higher than the average.
Right. Right. Oh, that was my point. Is that they paid him higher than the average because there's a pretty good chance he's going to have to play.
Right.
My point is, if they thought he was the starting quarterback and the agent felt that, you're not getting him for $7 million. You have to pay him like he's going to start 16. Even Mariota had more than that.
Well, but I would also tell you, because of the cap issue, that they had a lot of money under the cap. That's why they spent a lot. You also have, they have to meet the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
That may have been part of why they paid him. But I would tell you this: it could also mean that if Ritter's not ready, they want to go to a guy like Heineke who's started a bunch of games. So I don't know.
So we didn't count that. Ritter might be their guy who I liked a lot. So that would be.
Greg loves him. Oh, he loved him last year, and I remember when he and I had, he had, Greg liked. He was one of the strongest people with Ritter. I said, hey, there are guys who like him. There are guys who don't like him at all. Think he's a 5th round pick. He was drafted in the 3rd.
Yeah,
It's just mechanics and so forth. But look, they already said they were going to bring someone in, but of course that might have been Heineke who's going to compete for it. I didn't get the sense that, you talked to people at the owners meetings last week. I didn't get the real sense that was
okay.
But here's the thing: if Richardson's a wild card for this top 10, and you could take a franchise that's kind of very boring and needs some juice, and I mean Richardson is so. I mean, I know he's only 1 year, and I know it's a risk because history shows you these guys more often than not don't become players at the next level. They struggle because they're just not ready. And they haven't started enough. But I don't know. And look, Terry Fontenot came from New Orleans. He had a good pedigree, worked with Sean Payton and a really good front office there. And this is his big pick here. This is a big one.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. So basically the scenario we lay out then, though, I guess the overriding point is there's at least one quarterback available.
In this scenario, of
the
course, you
Eagles
could change
pick
that
in this scenario.
Yeah.
So that would play right into Howie's hands for a trade down.
Sure. And that's one of you need one of those group of corners to drop, like Joey, like if Gonzalez and Witherspoon go, because after that, I'm just looking at the cornerback group.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone will see Cam Smith as high as Joey Porter. Have you heard that? Anyone like anyone you talk to likes Cam Smith?
Not yet. I need to do more work on Cam Smith.
Okay. So if that's the case, if Joey Porter's there at 10, I get it. He's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, but people don't see him as elite.
Right.
So I don't know that anyone would trade up for him, but to me, it's those top 3 and then there's a drop off.
Mm-hmm.
And then with edge rushers or pass rushers, Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Van Ness. Now Nolan Smith is a little that we don't talk much about him. He's a guy who's really interesting, but he's smaller. He's not going to be for everybody.
Right.
That's why I think he drops farther down. Now, obviously, he would fit. The Eagles don't care.
Yep.
Look at Reddick. They don't care how small these guys are.
Now, Bijan Robinson is also still available in our scenario.
Yep. Which he should be.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So it really looks like if this scenario played out anywhere near what we discussed, you've got Skronsky, you've got Joey Porter Jr., you got Bijan Robinson, and you don't have Van Ness, you don't have Tyree Wilson, don't have Jalen Carter. So pretty interesting here. I don't think that they're going to go tackle. So offensive tackle, I mean.
Yeah, I don't see the kid from Ohio State, Paris Johnson. He's going to go in the upper half of the first round. Feel pretty strongly about that. But we need to figure out if teams think he's got multiple. Like, can he play inside if needed? Because he's a big kid.
Talked to a couple teams that, well, I shouldn't say teams, people from teams that aren't so fond of him. So,
in terms of,
just don't think he's a top 15 guy.
Oh, okay. Because I thought he was. Or the early word I got it like when I started on the offensive line was he should go in the upper half. But
okay. Yeah, hey, very well might. I'm just a couple of people's opinions, you know.
Okay. All right. So that's a quick run.
It really looks like corner, or I don't know. We need to see how they feel about Skronsky and what position he can play.
Folks, I'm telling you, we're running out of players who are very, like, again, it's a light elite class. It's not a great first round. Like Brian Branch, I like a lot. You talk a lot of people, but he should go in the second half of the first round. Miles Murphy's a very good player. Should go in the top 20. Smith and Jigba. I was going to say this till next week, but I'm leaving you with this. I had one guy tell me he's in his team's first round grades. Like only 12 of them. He got one of them.
Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me.
But here's why I say it. Because he barely played last season, but his tape was so good the year before. It's so rare that teams will. It doesn't happen much. We'll talk to Rick Spielman in the future. So I want to ask Rick this because this really happens. A guy misses almost the entire season in his final season at the school, and because teams they don't like going back 2 years. They have to sometimes put a lot of weight on the previous season, but because he didn't play very much, you got to go back 2 years. But he's so good. It's really cool when coaches tell you, I don't care what he runs. His tape was so elite. And this one guy said, he goes, oh yeah, we've got him as one of our first round grades. I'm like, really? Okay. Because he goes, I'm telling you, his tape was so good in 2021. We're good. And we love the kid. We don't care that he doesn't run in the 4-3. We don't care. He's that good. I'm like, okay.
This happens every year that even when it's not a strong wide receiver class, there's still 4 or 5 that go in the first round. Like this kid, Smith Njigba will go. And then, the kid from TCU who's 6'4", Quentin Richardson will go. And of course, Jordan Addison will go. And Zay Flowers will go.
Quentin Johnston. Yeah.
What's that?
You said Quentin Richardson.
Oh, Quentin Johnston.
The NBA player. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 4 right there who will probably wind up going in the first round. And I'm sure there's another
always
one.
Do.
Yeah, always.
Who's that? Who else was the other guy?
I said there's probably another one who I'm just not thinking of that's
I would say, okay, before we get out of here, it's going to be Quentin Richardson. Oh, Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers.
I said him. Yeah, he was one of the 4 I said.
Smith and Jigba, Flowers, Johnston. Now, Jordan Addison, this is a beauty. He's a man, receivers coach I spoke to are split on him. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Probably lower half of the first.
If he goes in the first of all, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Great stuff.
All right. So I think we gave people a good idea. I mean, if there's a chance that some things look different and there's a Van Ness or a Tyree Wilson there, I think that would be a hard player for the Eagles to pass on, especially if it's a Jalen Carter. But if not, then that would have pushed one of those corners down. And I think that becomes the conversation for the Eagles at that point, if not a trade down. That will do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds.